Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to News Dose. And to open up the week, Jeffy Jeff of the Game Awards revealed the 2024 nominees. It's a list. I don't know if it's necessarily a list that people agree with, but it's a list, all right. And, I think there's a lot that we need to discuss about this. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Because I feel like there's a growing part of the community that actually has some legitimate questions for this so-called celebration of gaming, as they like to advertise. So sit back, buckle up, and we'll talk about that today, as well as the shocking revelation for Sony's new $700+ console, the PlayStation 5 Pro, because it's allegedly worse than the standard PS5 in certain situations. Yeah, this is a rather bizarre situation, and I'll explain what all is happening here. Let's just go and get right into things, though, and I want to start off with a welcome surprise for 2025. For any PSP fan out there, you might recognize the iconic Patapon series. It's often viewed as one of the best rhythm games ever made, but sadly, it's not really had much of a life beyond the PSP. I mean, Sony did remaster them for the PS4, and you can still play them through backwards compatibility. I think that's actually a great way to play them if you haven't already. But we haven't gotten a brand new Patapon game since 2011 with the release of Patapon 3. Well, that's where Ratatan comes in to fill the void. Last year, the original Patapon creators under a new studio launched a Kickstarter campaign for a Patapon spiritual successor, Ratatan. And not only did they meet their initial funding goal, but they absolutely smashed them. They ended up raising, I believe it was 10 times more than what they asked for. And now here we are a year later, and they just launched this new gameplay trailer with a release window. It's officially slated for 2025. And check this out. Unlike the Patapon series, Ratatan will be completely 100% multi-platform. That means it'll be available on PlayStation, Nintendo, PC, and yes, it's even going to be available on Xbox. So, yeah, this is awesome news, and honestly, I think Ratatan looks great. They describe it as having roguelike elements, and there's even cooperative gameplay, which could be interesting. I think the only thing that I personally regret is not getting the physical edition during its Kickstarter campaign, because after seeing this new trailer, I'm very intrigued by what Ratatan has to offer. Now, we also got some game updates from Capcom and a few of their 2024 releases. Unfortunately, Kumitsugami Path of the Goddess has sold below their internal expectations. It's kind of this unique tower defense game, and that kind of surprised people when it first released, and that's because their early previews never really did a great job at showcasing its gameplay, to the point I don't think most people even knew what it was supposed to be. And that's something that I really respect about Capcom in this situation and how they reported this. You know, a lot of times when you see companies report lower than expected sales numbers, they kind of shift the blame to those individual teams that worked on them, and then they just disband them. Ubisoft and Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown as one such example. But in this case, Capcom took full accountability, and they said one of the reasons for this was that advanced promotion to generate interest and raise awareness was insufficient, and that it plans to continue promotion in the future with the aim of achieving its target. So they completely understand that their marketing was a core issue in this situation. But as a side note here, they did confirm that Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster is selling as planned, and that's really good news for Dead Rising fans, because back in September, Capcom actually mentioned that a Dead Rising 2 remaster or a remake is possible depending on how this game tracks over time. So, this could potentially just be the beginning of more to come for the Dead Rising series. Now, here's something that might not be as surprising when you start to think about it, but if it turns out to be true, I also know that there will be some questions on why it's even needed in the first place, and that's the idea of a Dark Souls 3 remaster. According to Nick Baker on the Xbox Era podcast, he's heard that a remaster is in development. Now, like I said, I understand that some people will question this just because Dark Souls 3 isn't really that old of a game. It released back in 2016, and it's still playable via backwards compatibility at 60 frames per second. But at the same time, this really kind of fits the status quo for the entire Dark Souls trilogy up to this point. They already remastered the first game, and you can technically say that Scholars of the First Sin was also a remaster for the second game as well. So a Dark Souls 3 remaster, I can't imagine this is going to take a ton of their resources, but it could come out with a better resolution and, just have all of its bonus DLC included. I think that makes sense just based on how FromSoft has done some of their other games in the past. Now, hopefully they do something like that for Bloodborne as well. I'm just going to kind of throw that out there. But what I'll kind of say about this is that there's probably more interest in the Souls series now than ever before, thanks to the release of Elden Ring. And this would just kind of be yet another opportunity to jump into these all-time classics, which could even include Nintendo for the first time ever. Hypothetically, it could launch on the Switch successor. It should be more than capable, which, hey, that'd be pretty cool. Okay, so since we're on the topic of From Software, as much as I love them and I love their games, we need to talk about the 2024 Game Award nominees and the inevitable controversy that comes along with them. I mean, it feels like this has become a more frequent thing for this event in these past few years, and, a part of me would like to sit here and say, hey, this is not the be-all, end-all Game of the Year awards. But at the end of the day, it is the most talked about awards in the game industry, and it's positioned as this prestigious showcase. So the reality is, whether we like it or not, we just kind of hope that the so-called Game Awards panel and Jeff Keighley can represent what gamers enjoyed during that given year and can nominate games that are deserving of each individual category. And just to be completely fair here, it is difficult to narrow a list down to something everybody will universally agree with. That's impossible. My favorite game for 2024 might be Astrobot, where yours might be, let's say, Space Marine 2. The truth is that it's all subjective. But that's also where the Game Awards is starting to kind of rub people the wrong way. Because the problem here these past 2 years hasn't been so much about the games that are getting snubbed. I mean, to a degree, yes, it's linked to that. But the bigger issue that people are pointing out is that some of their choices are legitimately questionable. When I sit down and I think about this, I do believe that these are legitimate questions raised from the community. And I feel like there's kind of an easy solution to this that's simply being ignored, and maybe that's by design. But I digress. Last year, of course, they nominated Resident Evil 4 as a 2023 Game of the Year contender. And, I mean, that's honestly an amazing game. I'd easily recommend it to anybody who hasn't played it already. But the argument against it as a Game of the Year contender, I mean, that's the main focus here, is that it's a remake from, 2005? So it almost seems unfair to give it a spot in 2023 and take recognition away from games that were built from the ground up for 2023. And there's a pretty easy solution to give both recognition. Just simply create a category for remakes and remasters. That seems fairly logical. We get enough remasters and remakes on a given year. That should easily be able to be done. And I feel like I can kind of say the same thing about today's controversy. A few days ago, the Game Awards decided to release an FAQ to basically validate one of their nominees. It's like they knew that, yeah, there's going to be a controversy here. Now, all of a sudden, DLC can be considered a Game of the Year contender at the Game Awards, which that means here's your nominees. Astrobot, which is probably my Game of the Year. Absolutely love that game. There's Balatro. Not sure I would have necessarily chosen that one, but, I know a lot of people love it, so okay, fair enough. Wukong being a breakout new IP, has sold, 20 million copies in, just a few weeks. Just absolutely incredible. Then there's Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I absolutely love that game. ReFantazio, no qualms there. It's really nice to see some JRPG love. And then, the big controversy, Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree. Now, just to be clear about this, and for my longtime followers, you probably already know this about me, Elden Ring is one of my favorite games ever made. So what I'm about ready to say has absolutely nothing to do with its quality, and Shadow of the Erdtree, it's a great DLC. I'm not trying to take anything away from Software. They're one of my favorite studios of all time, but I can also sit here and say that I'd be shocked if even From Software thought that this was going to get nominated for Game of the Year. They probably woke up this morning and were just as surprised as the rest of us to see it as a Game of the Year contender. See, the problem here is that it's a DLC that requires a 2022 game to play it. Now, if it was a standalone game that doesn't need the base game to prop itself up, then fine. So be it, no problem. But the fact that Jeff Keighley put out an FAQ days ahead of time, that tells me that they knew that this was a questionable choice. And why is that? Because they know what they're doing here. They know that this is taking recognition away from other studios that worked hard on a brand new 2024 game. Again, what they should have done here seems fairly simple. They should have either included it in the existing ongoing category, which doesn't include it, or they could have created a DLC award if they really felt like they wanted to. And that's just scratching the surface for some of their just outright baffling choices. I mean, if you look at the action-adventure category as one such example, somehow Astrobot was nominated. Again, it's probably my game of the year, so I'm not trying to attack this game. But Astrobot is not an action-adventure game. That seems like a very loose term to describe what Astrobot is. This is a platformer. But it just kind of feels like they shoehorned Astrobot into this category despite it not really being an action-adventure. And I could also question Silent Hill 2 as an action-adventure, which seems questionable to say the least. And somehow, Outlaws got nominated out of all games that they could have included here. I mean, I haven't seen a single person describe Star Wars Outlaws as a Game of the Year worthy contender of anything. I mean, I don't know. Like I get the excitement. I understand the excitement for the Game Awards. It's basically a winter E3. But in my opinion, how do I want to say this? By this point, I would much rather somebody else take over these type of events. Coming from him and his panelists, none of what happened today is shocking to me. I expect their nominees to be questionable. And, you know, they'll take a back seat at the actual showcase. And I expect his showcase to be bloated like it is every single year. That's something that I always complain about. It'll be another 3-hour plus spectacle filled with ads and random games that paid him a lot of money to be there. And there will be an occasional fun announcement. And that's what we all tune in for. We want to hear about those fun announcements. But we're also going to have to sit through a lot of mediocrity. The days of hyping this event up to be this prestigious award showcase, you know, just this celebration for gaming, I just don't believe that. I believe that this showcase for him is a way of generating a lot of money. I think that's what this is about. I think this is a vanity project for him. I think it's a winter E3 for him. And I think it's a far reach from being the quality of E3, and I think it's a far reach from representing deserving games of individual categories. I feel like he's linked to a lot of questionable decisions, but hey, that's just me. Maybe you disagree. Maybe you love the Game Awards. Maybe you love his Gamescom events and all the other things that he does. But, you know, I'm definitely on the side where I think there are some legitimate questions around what he does, and that's just kind of how I feel about it. But, you know, let me know what you all think about this. If you disagree, I'm all ears. I love hearing people's opinions. So let me hear what you think about all of this in the comments below. Now, one last thing before we go, though. More impressions are starting to flow in for the PlayStation 5 Pro, and this might sound a little shocking at first, but, I mean, I can tell you firsthand, there is some truth to this. Apparently, there are a select few Pro-enhanced games. I'm not saying it's the majority, but there are a select few Pro-enhanced games that visually, as of this time, look worse than they do on the base PlayStation 5. I mean, we're talking about a $700 to $800 console that's meant to upgrade PlayStation 5 games. So to hear that it's doing the opposite is a bit of an embarrassing look for Sony to have any Pro-enhanced games look worse. And what's happening here is that seemingly PSSR, which is Sony's AI upscaling technology, is introducing some kind of shimmering effect for a select few games, most notably being Star Wars Jedi Fallen, Alan Wake 2, and Silent Hill 2. I mean, Silent Hill 2 almost looks broken with just how much shimmering it has, especially while you're outdoors. I've been playing it on a PS5 Pro myself. It's a great game. I can assure you of that. But what I can say is that it does have better performance than the standard PS5 version, but it introduces this bizarre-looking shimmering effect that plagues outdoor areas. Now, the good news here is that Bloober Team did say today that they're working on it to fix it, so hopefully that comes soon. But this issue is seemingly linked to PSSR. Now, to be fair here, there's other games where PSSR makes games look amazing. like with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which is a night and day improvement over the base PS5. And then there's games like Lies of P and Stellar Blade. I think those look amazing as well. So it's kind of this mixed bag right now. I mean, there does seem to be more good than bad, and that's one of the reasons that I do want to stress that this technology is still in its infancy stage. You know, it is a machine learning technology, and just like FSR and DLSS, it will improve over time, but for the time being, something that I think studios needs to kind of understand is to give consumers the option to disable PSSR in situations like this. There should be zero games that look worse on the PS5 Pro, and if they would have given fans the option to turn PSSR on or off in the first place, then this probably wouldn't have been that big of a deal. But in games like Silent Hill 2, you're forced to play with PSSR, and it's kind of giving fans buyer's remorse. I mean, when you have PS5 Pro consumers who paid a lot of money to upgrade from their base PS5, wishing they would have kept their base PS5 because a game looks better on it, you know, that's just not a good look. Now, again, I do expect this problem to get better over time because FSR and DLSS, they also had similar issues up on their inception. But this is definitely not a great look for one of the most expensive consoles ever made. Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this episode. But until next time, make sure to hit that subscribe button and peace out.